Oh, greetings and welcome everybody. Another beautiful sunny day from London, but greetings to everyone joining in. An exciting day in the life of a risk or compliance manager. We're joined by Chris Payne and Dom Saunders, and we'll introduce them a little bit. But before we go on, a couple of things. Thank you for joining us. And before Chris, we move on to the next slide. Before we get into the main topic, we just share a little bit of what we were thinking whilst, designing the particular webinar. And the one title we have is An Exciting Day in the Life of a Compliance Manager. Now, if any of you joining in are a risk and or compliance manager, I'm sure you agree you have a very exciting job. But if you move to the next one, Chris, thank you. And the other title that we thought of, but we did not stick with, was Risk Management or Compliance Management, WTF. Now, this is a why the fuss rather than anything else if you want to think about it. So we didn't obviously use that one. And then we thought about, we couldn't find any photos of good old Mr. Trump. However, we did come up with the Making Compliance Great Again. And I think Chris and I, whilst designing this, really liked this one, but we stuck with the title. So, Chris, moving on to who we all are. Dom, I'll start with you if you want to introduce yourself a little bit.
Yeah, my name is Dominic Saunders. I'm the CTO and one of the founding members of Netconsent, Compliance Policy Management Solution, and we'll be following up with from Chris and Amar today and showing you a little bit about what we do. So over to you, Chris.
Yeah, so my name's Chris Payne, and I am the Managing Director and Founder of Advanced Cyber Solutions. We are a IT security solution and consultancy business, and I'm fast becoming a bit of a regular on these webinars, so very pleased to be back.
Well, thank you. And folks, I'm the one with the blue turban, the most handsome one, I guess. I'm just kidding. However, the point of today is not to sell you anything, but the point of today is for us to share our experiences and actually to show you a bit of a demo of what we use ourselves, what our customers use to demonstrate that a risk control that has been selected to lower risk exposure is working. And many other things that we're going to discuss. So, Chris, if we move on to the next one, and one of the things that really, I know demonstrate compliance is not the exact thing, but the point is, how do you show a control is effective, right? And that's one of the things we're going to look at today. If we move on to the next one, something really important, especially with, we have the four-letter word that starts with G, has a T, has a P, and an R in it, but the GDPR, one of the significant risks that we all are looking at is the third-party risk. How do you manage the third parties effectively, and not just giving them an Excel spreadsheet and telling them to fill it in, but to me it's much more than that. And that's one of the demos, one of the things we wanted to discuss with you. Just to reiterate, folks, please make this interactive. Chris Payne is going to be looking at all the questions coming in. If you don't agree, obviously please say so, but if you have any questions, please ask, right? And Chris, we move on to the next one. And this is a beautiful image there that Chris has chosen, is how do we enforce how do we enforce a control? To be able to, demonstrate, for example, in the third-party case, how do we enforce something so that we know that the third party is, accepting the risk, for example. And we're going to give a demo on that in a few seconds. Chris, do you want to talk a little about the evidence part of this?
Yeah, absolutely. So, and you mentioned it earlier on in the webinar, particularly when we think about things like GDPR. And yes, it is a very overplayed topic, but I think that when it comes to enforcement and demonstrating compliance, GDPR is the best one to go to because it has those really stinging penalties. the ability to show that you're compliant, demonstrate to an auditor or demonstrate to your supervisory authority that you are enforcing controls, you are enforcing policy, and you've done absolutely everything you can, then you're going to be you're going to be lowering that risk of actually attracting one of those higher level fines. So, I hate to bring the example of GDPR in, but it's an obvious one to jump to in this day and age.
No, totally. And if we move on to the next one, I mean, to be totally honest with everyone, joining in, and I know there are over 150 people, registered and showed interest even before we did any advertising about this particular webinar. But this is truly exciting times for risk management, for compliance management, and I know it's exciting for GDPR, yeah, sure, but I think it's really exciting for us to be sharing this kind of approach with you, because regardless of the product, this is not a product pitch, I must stress. This is us sharing with you our experience on how you can do something more effectively and try to bring in, I think, Dom, you would agree, one of the things, that I really am passionate about, because we see this with a lot with cyber criminals, is cyber criminals love automation, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And for some reason, regular folks don't like automation, if I may. So one of the demos that we want to share with you today is how can we use automation effectively to make the job easier. Whether you're a compliance manager, whether you're a risk manager, whether you're looking at, okay, I've got all this great, training and awareness, how do I evidence all of this automatically and effectively? So I think without much ado, Chris, the next thing is we're going to go into a live demo, correct? And
or we have some poll questions maybe we should get from the audience.
Yes, sorry. We've got 2 poll questions, Chris. Do you want to read the first one? Sorry, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So the first question that we have here, and I'm just going to make that active now, is can you prove that your users have read and understood your policies? So we're asking our audience whether they can demonstrate and prove that their users have read and understood their policies.
I think the important thing to think about here is it's all very well keeping a manual audit, but how do you can you actually prove that people have read and understood those 2 auditors in a way that is actually verifiable? And that's, I think, the key thing we're looking for here is it's all very well saying yes or no, but actually is it verifiable?
I think another key word here is understanding the policy also, isn't it? I mean, if everyone can put their hands up virtually, I guess, how many of us actually read a full policy? I probably am not putting my hands up, I'll tell you right now, Job.
I think that's absolutely true, and I think what we have to look at in the whole of this process, and we'll see this in a minute, is making policies actually consumable and interesting and engaging to people. If we either set out to achieve a tick-in-the-box compliance model, or we set out to actually achieve compliance. And I think in this day and age, and I'm not going to mention the 4 letters that everybody's talking about at the moment, because it doesn't matter what it is, whether it's ISO 27001, whether it's PCI DSS, whether it's internal best practices, they result in having policies and procedures in place within organisations, both for internal and external organisations.
No, totally. Yeah. I think one really interesting thing one interesting thing to point out here, this is not just about policy, because policy is a control.
Yes.
So hence the risk element to this. We are not only talking about policy because policy is definitely an effective thing, but we are also looking at it from a risk management perspective. So just to keep that in mind. Chris, how are we doing on the results?
So yeah, the results are in, and we had an overwhelming answer of no, and that's 69%. That was followed by 23% saying yes, and we had a final minority, 7%, saying don't know. So I guess they can kind of be put into the no box.
Interesting. Wow. Let's go with the second question before we dive into the live demo. What's the second question on the survey?
Indeed. So the next question we have is, in terms of the policies that you have, and we're asking the audience this, do you have a central repository for all of your policies? So when we talk about these central repositories, Dom, are we talking about just a SharePoint site or a Windows share, a file share, something like that? What is your interpretation of that central repository?
I don't think it really matters what that central repository is, although obviously making it dynamic and consumable will obviously make it more valuable within an organisation. But I think it's important to have one single place where people go, and whether that is embedded into the intranet or whether that is on a file share. You know, some organisations don't have the luxury of having complex intranets, or some organisations don't have the skills to be able to upload files to an intranet necessarily. And so I think it's important just to have a single centralised repository.
Dom, can I add to that? To me, what's really important is, and I'm guilty of this myself, excuse me, is that if I have to go and search for a policy, even if it may be in a centralized SharePoint, etc., etc., most of the time I can't find it, right?
Yep. Absolutely.
Okay? Because I'm not using the right search terminology, or I keep forgetting where it is, you know. So to me, I guess more effectively is for having a system, and again we talk about automation and technology, to deliver that to my end user, to me, on a basis, you know, rather than just relying on the user to be able to remember, oh, I have to now read the acceptable use policy because I forgot what I can't do.
Absolutely.
And just to add to that as well is I've spent a lot of my career doing data classification projects and implementations, and one of the things that I've found overwhelmingly common in those scenarios is most of the IT team or even the information security team are aware of there being a policy for data classification. But when you speak to somebody working in a different department, marketing, HR, something like that, they have no idea. And it's probably present on somewhere like an internet share, an intranet site, something like that. But generally, they have no idea it's there. And a lot of the time, it does come down to too many documents in one place. As Amar said, not knowing the terminology, because a lot of these documents are labeled with codes and using jargon that's just not accessible to everybody else in the organization. So there's also, I guess, a bit of a game here in turning policy into something that is consumable, which I think, Dom, you mentioned earlier on.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think you have to make these documents engaging if you want people to read them, and you have to make them, as Amar said, findable, searchable, so that people can access them very easily. I think the first step is to get a centralized repository. The second step is then to convert that centralized repository into a usable, valuable asset that adds value to the business.
What did the reader say? Yeah.
Well, I was going to say actually the same thing. I'm sorry for cutting you off there, but we had 88% of our audience say yes, they do have a central repository for all their policies. So it looks like, Dom, step one has been covered by our audience. So maybe not so much.
Yeah.
Excellent. I think as we all agree, I think central repository is good, but actually, do you have the right mechanism, whether it's a tool or not, but do you have a right mechanism to deliver the message to the user, you know? Excellent, John. We're going to hand over to you now.
Okay, superb. Do we want to do the other questions, or are we going to...
We'll do them towards the end of the...
Okay.
Two more questions first, yeah. Excellent. Well, let me just introduce this part for you, Dom. You mentioned, when I just asked you a question then, you mentioned making policies engaging, which I guess a lot of people might think is quite a humorous way of describing it. And we've got a slide specifically for this. We put it there, exciting. So you know, what we'd like to do now is hand over the screen to Dom, and Dom is going to show you a solution called Netconsent, which is obviously who he works for. And he'll show you how you can make those policies a little bit more engaging so that you can demonstrate good compliance.
Yeah, I must stress, Chris, that we also use this solution ourselves. So
yes.
This is not a solution selling. This is actually demonstrating a way and something that we use, but very importantly, an effective way to do what we believe in. So you don't have to use any product, and make this very clear to the users listening in. But this is a live demo that Dom is going to give. He knows his product in and out, and he's going to show you some of the really cool and more importantly effective features that you can use to basically use technology to help you lower risk and, actually make policy exciting. Dom, over to you, sir.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Amar. Thank you, Chris. So what we're going to do in the next 15 minutes is just have a quick look at the sort of life as an end user sees it, and then we can have a quick look at the analysis and the reporting side that sits behind Netconsent. One of the things that we come across a lot today is that we send policies are updated. Most organisations do have policies, but more often than not, they're an organisation's best kept secret, because you go through the whole laborious task of writing policies by very senior people in the organisation. Therefore, they have significant costs to the organisation. They then go to a senior board to be ratified, and then more often than not, they're put up on an intranet or they're put on a shared drive somewhere, and an email sent round, and we hope that people go and see it. Well, guess what? That's not actually going to achieve the state that we want to achieve, which is compliance. And our risk is not what we have done and we've got correct. Our risk exposure is where the gaps are, i.e. who hasn't done what. And a lot of risk management and policy management and compliance is all around how we are going to achieve the standards that either we want to or we have to by regulatory control. And as a result of that, a lot of the sort of start of that is to make sure that we have policies and procedures in place. Now, the policies and procedures are the rules, and that's all very well having those in place. But what we need to do is we need to make compliance an ongoing program. You are only compliant at the time at which you are audited, and therefore what we need to do moving forward is make sure that we have an ongoing program to make sure that we are compliant at all points in time. So what I'm going to show you now is how Netconsent can help an organisation to sort of flip the whole process on its head and move away from simply having a repository that people go to when they want to, if they've got time, and so on, and take away that consumer decision about, is this relevant to me? And enable us to turn the whole table round and for the organisation to be able to identify and determine who needs to see what and when and in what priority. Okay? Now, the first thing to say is Netconsent is totally clientless, so there is nothing installed on workstations whatsoever. As part of the logon process, we do a check to say, is there anything for this user to process? If there isn't, they will just log on and see their desktop. If, however, there is, one of the options that we have available to us is the ability to be able to intercept somebody's login and to present them with their outstanding action list. Now, imagine this is a new starter that's just joined the organisation today, and the organisation has determined that we want somebody to sign up to the IT acceptable usage policy before they can start using our corporate network. Okay, so here you can see we have an IT acceptable usage policy, and it's in red. It is what we call mandatory, i.e. the user has to sign up to this before they will be able to log into our network. There's no login button, and if they try and close the kiosk down, it says click OK to return to Netconsent or cancel to be logged out of your workstation. There's no way around it. Now, imagine this is a new starter that's just joined the organisation today. You'll also note that there are 7 other outstanding actions. Okay, some of which have dates against them. Those dates are not set dates. They are a number of days from when this individual first sees it. So today is the 27th of July, and I have 5 days to sign up to the data protection policy or to process that, after which it will become mandatory. If I joined on the 1st of September, that date would say the 5th of September. Okay, automatically. So we automatically provision content for new starters, and we don't lock people out unless we need to. We automatically give everybody the same amount of time to process this. If I came back from holiday in 2 weeks' time, my first day would start, the countdown would start from my next logon. Okay. In order to be able to proceed, I have to open up this particular document. In this instance, I am presented with a PDF. Okay, and it happens to be a 3-page PDF written in short sentences, bullet points, etc., etc. It's fairly consumable. It's not a 40 or a 50-page document. Now, when we take those 40 and 50-page documents that organisations traditionally have, and we analyse those, what we identify very quickly is that they don't just contain the policy, i.e. the rules, but they contain the procedures, the standards, the guidelines, and all the information that comes together to make the policy comprehensive. And it's all important information. But actually, when we look at what we need people to sign up to, we probably just need people to sign up to the rules more often than not. But we need them to be able to access the associated procedures should they need to. So within Netconsent, we have the concept of associated documents, and we can build document associations up. So here you'll notice at the bottom we have action buttons. However, if I open up the associated procedure, this happens to be a PDF, and if I scroll down to the bottom here, there are no buttons. This is what we call an advisory document. People need to sign up to the rules, but be able to find the associated procedures at the press of a button if they need to, very quickly. Now, what I can keep doing is I can keep updating the procedure at the back end, and whenever I click on that link from the policy, it will always take me to the current version of that document. There is no way as an end user that I can access an old version of a document, even by mistake. Okay. So I'll go back to the policy now. And now, policy management and policies within an organisation, as I said earlier, is a fairly dull subject. And as such, we need to make the content engaging. So within Netconsent, we can deliver any content at all. And that may be, for example, video, or it may well be interactive HTML5 sites, e-learning modules, etc., written in HTML5, and we can enforce those delivery using Netconsent. Okay. Now, this is a video that's available on YouTube, freely available. As long as you're happy that at the end of it it says sponsored by McAfee and Toshiba, it is openly available for people to use. And I think, personally, this is a 2-minute video on the do's and don'ts of social media that every organisation in the UK would benefit from delivering to its employees. And I guarantee you'll get a bigger uptake on video than you will by sending out a 3-page policy and wording policy on use of social media. Now, the rules need to be there, but I would challenge that this is a better way to get messages across to people to complement that the policies that exist. Okay. What I'm going to do now is go back over to the policy, and when I go back to the policy, I have the ability down at the bottom to accept or query that policy. If I query the policy, I have to give a reason. That reason is emailed to the policy owner. There are only 2 instances in Netconsent where we use email. One of those is when somebody queries your policy, they have to give a reason. And the second is when a document is due for review. We automate the whole of the review process, and to save people having to log into the admin console all the time, we notify them by email that this particular document is due for review in 2 weeks' time, or a month's time, or 3 months' time, depending on the priority of the complexity of the document. When somebody clicks on accept, we ask them to type in their network password as a digital signature to prove it was them that clicked on accept and not somebody else using their PC. Okay. When I click on OK, that will now write to the audit database that Lisa Thomas has signed up to version 1.3 of the IT Acceptable Usage Policy on this date at this time. She will not see that policy again unless it's automatically represented to her on a scheduled basis, unless it is manually represented to her. We've had a security breach and we therefore need to roll out this policy to this group of users or everybody or this individual again, or unless there is a new version of that document released that requires her sign-up. Now, there is one other time that she could get presented with that policy or whatever the document was, and that is what you'll notice now is that a new piece of a new piece of content has been provisioned for this user, and that is the IT Acceptable Use Policy exam, i.e. the test that relates to the policy that we've just signed up to. It could be relating to e-learning, it could be relating to procedures, whatever content you want. Now, that test obviously couldn't be there before because they hadn't completed the associated content. Now they've completed it, I, for the demonstration purposes, have set that test to appear immediately afterwards. Normally, I would set it to appear 2 weeks or a month later. Okay? But for the purpose of the demonstration, I need to set it to appear immediately. You'll also notice down here that the login button's available. Okay? So I could log in if I wanted to, but I'm just going to show you the functionality of Examiner. We can build question pools up of 5, 50, 150 questions, as many as we want. We can align those questions to a competency framework, should we run one in an organisation. Answer types are yes, no, true, false, multiple choice. You select which the right answer is, and therefore all others are deemed to be incorrect, so that we can electronically mark whether somebody's passed or failed a test. I have passed today with 60%. I can print the certificate if I want to, and now I can click on finish. Now, had I failed that test, we could have had the option either to represent the test again, represent the associated policy or e-learning content again, followed by the test, or represent just the policy or the e-learning content by itself, or do nothing. So there is that chance that we could have had the policy represented to us. Okay. I'm going to log in at this point, and it'll tell me that I have non-mandatory actions, which I'll be reminded of the next time I log in. And once I'm logged in, now that was fairly intrusive. So what I'm going to do this time is I'm going to log off and show you what happens when a user logs on the following day. And to show you that we don't necessarily need to be quite as intrusive as that. And by the way, this is only one of the options that we have. So as part of the log-on process, we do the same check. And Windows has decided to deactivate itself, so I've moved these VMwares, apologies. And what happens is we launch Netconsent, but we launch Netconsent on the user's desktop. And Netconsent will sit there for 30 seconds, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, however long you set, before it will fade away. So it will remind you each day that you have outstanding actions without actually interrupting you and stopping you from logging on. Okay. We can have Netconsent display at 3 p.m. In the afternoon, or an hour after somebody logs on, or we can actually have, because we believe that organisations should have a single centralised repository for all corporate information as well as compliance-related information, and that should obviously be the intranet wherever possible. Then what we can do is we can very easily embed the Policy Management Centre into the intranet. And this is a simple, very basic mock-up intranet, nothing complex at all, but we have all the SharePoint web parts, etc., that people can also embed Netconsent content directly into SharePoint portals, etc. So I can go here at any point in time and undertake my outstanding actions. And one of those may well be what we call an informer message, which is a method of communicating or distributing corporate communications, user awareness campaigns. I can say, right, during the month of July, I need everybody to see this message. I'm going to also set up August message and September and October and November's message. And they may well be as simple as an infographic like this that gets a message across to you in 3 seconds that most, if I was writing it out in text, most people would, it would take 7 or 8 or 9 lines of text that very few people would read. Okay, so we can use Netconsent for delivering corporate communications. What else can we access from the Policy Management Centre? Well, we can get to My History, which is the only place as an end user that I can potentially open up an old version of a document, and that's because it applied to me at one point in time. I can see here that I signed up to the IT Acceptable Usage Policy on Thursday the 19th of March 2015, version 1.2. Now, if I do open that up, I will be able to get to the text in a moment, but it will tell me that it's either been superseded by a newer version or is currently out of service. So I click on OK, and at that point I'm presented with the wording. So I can't open up a document even by mistake. I can open it up, but I can't open it up by mistake and assume it's the current version because I am notified that it's there. We also have the Centralized Compliance Library, which is the active documents, which contains all content that I am entitled to see. Okay, and for example, under facility policies, we have the mobile phone policy. Now, I don't have a company mobile phone, therefore I don't need to sign up to the policy. However, this small group of users over here do, and therefore I need to get them to sign up to it. But I can also set it such that anybody can actually go and read that document, or I can have it locked down so that only certain people can actually access that content. And this is really important, that this is the place where the current version of content is available to me, and it is specifically available to me as a user because it knows who I am logged in as. Okay. Every screen has basic search on it. We also have full-blown advanced search. Every document that's uploaded to the system is indexed and put into the system such that it's then searchable and obviously fully secured as well. Okay. One other piece of functionality that we have, and I'm just going to switch over to the administration portal just for a second, is the ability to send out urgent, what we call alerts to people. Now, Alerter is a module that enables us to deliver communications directly to people's desktops during the day. So let's say, for example, we may have had, there may be a phishing attack going on, there may be an email server problem. I'm just going to activate 3 alerts here before I switch back over to here. Whilst we're waiting for this to happen, it can take up to a minute for it to work. I'm just going to ask Chris and Amar if they could come in. We've got a question in from the audience. Can we use this webinar as a CPE for IC2 and ISACA certifications? I don't know if Chris or Amar, you can shed any light on that at all?
Yes, I can. So you do indeed earn CPE points for being in these webinars, but you must be present for 45 minutes or more.
Okay. Excellent. Thank you very much. Now, hopefully this isn't going to show me up today, but in a moment we should have some alerts appearing in the bottom right-hand corner. There we are. We have them. So those are the alerts in low, medium, and high level. You'll see down here we have an InfoSec alert. Please note that we're currently receiving a high number of phishing emails. Now, for us to be able to send this out to 1,000 people at the push of a button, make sure that it's in people's minds whilst a phishing attack is going on, rather than sending out emails and people not in the office and so on and so forth. And it's a much more efficient way of getting communication out there, and it will display directly onto people's desktops at any point in time. Okay. To back all of this up, over on the administration side, we have two reporting tools, and this is where the sort of risk management, compliance management comes in, because as I said at the beginning, we can have all of this content in terms of e-learning, in terms of policies, etc., going out to people. Our risk is not who has done it, our risk is who hasn't done it. And rather than sitting there with massive Excel spreadsheets of names and ticking people off and phoning them up and chasing them, all I have to do here is type in Thomas, and I am then presented here. Why have we? There we are. Just refresh the screen, and I'm presented here with an audit trail of who has done what, and what we'll see in a moment, who hasn't done what. So I can see here that Lisa Thomas signed up to the IT Acceptable Usage Policy on the 27th of the 7th, 2017, and it was on the screen for 3 minutes 34 seconds. Now that's not in red, it's in blue rather than red, because it's over the minimum read threshold that we set for that particular document. So we can set ourselves bars, and we need people to process it in more time than that. It's very interesting when you run the read trend time analysis graphs to actually be able to see that 95% of people have processed it in under 10 seconds, and therefore you know that people haven't actually read it. What are you trying to achieve? Are you trying to achieve a tick in the box from a compliance perspective, or are you actually trying to achieve compliance in the true way of making sure that people then act in the way in which you are going to be compliant? So I think there's two views of compliance there. And we also have Reporter Pro, which is our enterprise reporting tool, which enables us to produce all of the high-level, low-level summary graphs, graphical reports, etc., as well as the evidential listing reports for presentation to third parties. We also have compliance dashboards where we can actually map our policies to our compliance standards, so ISO 27001 to PCI DSS, or to our internal business processes such as lone working and remote working and so on. Once we've mapped those to one another, we can then produce the compliance dashboard, which enable us to look at, okay, how well are we doing in terms of communication of our content out to people? How well are we doing in terms of our training, our e-learning uptake and participation? And it's all very well communicating to people, policies and procedures, etc. It's all very well training people, but actually the third leg looks at how good are we, or how good are our users at understanding that content. Because if they don't actually understand that content, surely we're wasting our time in terms of the other areas. And therefore we need to go back and look at, is the content good enough? Is it consumable? Is it engaging? Are people actually looking at it or not? So if I take this report, and I've just run this report for all users for all current versions of policies, if I were to go and, if I was head of HR, I may choose that I want to run this for the HR department for all policies. But I also have to report back to the board about the fact that I need to look at the compliance status of all users within the organisation with regard to HR policies. So we can slice and dice this in any way, shape or form we like. Here I can see that number of documents deployed are 20, number of users being managed 135, document reviews accepted 535, declined 23, and pending 1,752. That gives me a compliance status of 23.16% very compliant, which obviously leaves me a large area of non-compliant, and that is where my risk is. So the next page, because I've run this at the top here, you can see with exceptions by user, the next page delivers me all of the exceptions filtered or grouped by users. So if I were to go down to here, and I should see here, Lisa Thomas is still pending for these 8 outstanding actions. Okay, but the last time she logged on was today at 14:26. That's UK time, 14:26. Now, if that's more than 3 months old, I should be asking myself the question, why? Are they on long-term sick? Have they left? Why are we actively provisioning content for this user, i.e. they have an active Active Directory account? Why are we actively provisioning content for them if they're not logging on? We either need to go and disable their account, because that's, again, another security risk, or we need to encourage them to sign on. Okay. Now, that's how we deal with internal users, traditionally Active Directory or eDirectory users, where we dynamically synchronize with the directories. One of the really important things that Amar picked up at the beginning was the need to be able to extend our compliance to third parties, because our risk is no longer just inside our traditional boundaries. Think of it in terms of the old security model. The old security model was we put firewalls up and we'd actually create ourselves a perimeter. All of a sudden that's now gone to the cloud. We don't have traditional perimeters, and our compliance state is exactly the same. We've always thought about compliance as being our internal workforce. However, we're now outsourcing. We're now using third parties for different parts of our function. We're engaging with volunteers if we're a charity, for example, and we have other people, third parties such as lawyers, etc., where we may need them to sign up to non-disclosure agreements, confidentiality agreements. And so what we can do with Netconsent is we have the ability not just to be able to add people in manually, but we have the whole concept of self-registration as well if we want to. So I have actually registered using this email account, and I'm going to now log into the system via a web portal. And I'm very sorry because I forgot to reset this after the last time I used it, so give me 2 seconds. The key thing about third parties is that it cannot be a onerous task, an administrative task in terms of setting these users up, and it should be self-fulfilling or self-managing if at all possible. So what the organisation has determined is that every person needs to see the What is Netconsent video. Okay. However, I am a third-party IT provider, and therefore I need to go into Manage Subscriptions and select from a list third-party IT provider. Now, based on selecting that, Netconsent is going to subscribe me to that role within the system and provision content for me. So I have, from today until Wednesday the 9th of August, 28 days, to sign up to the IT Acceptable Usage Policy, after which, and it will keep reminding me via email, after which I may not be able to actually operate on behalf of the organisation. So it kind of moves compliance into the ownership of the third parties. Now, where we may have sensitive roles that we don't want to have listed, we also have the ability to be able to subscribe by role code. And that role code is a 6 or an 8-digit alphanumeric code that I would type in here, and it would then go and add me to that role. So that's how we can very easily and with very little overhead from an internal perspective manage our third-party compliance. And it's all done through the same library that we have for the rest of Netconsent. And that, Chris and Noir, is a very quick run-through in 20 minutes of Netconsent. So if there are any questions that we have, please feel free to ask those, at which point I'll hand back over to Chris, and we'll take any further comments.
Dom, thank you so much. Chris, before we go with the questions, shall we do the next 2 survey questions?
Yes, absolutely. So I'll make the third poll question live now. So this is for our audience to vote on. And the question is, do you currently automate compliance management? Yes, no, or don't know?
Do you currently automate compliance? Yeah, it goes back to the automate question. I'd love to hear the response on that. Dom, in terms of automation.
I think compliance management is an ever-increasing task, and whereas maybe a few years ago it was sort of a part-time role for some within some organisations, it's now really as a full-time role and is growing by the day. And I think organisations have to recognise that compliance is a cost to, or will be a cost to the business, and it has to have a cost centre within the business, and is a key part of the safe running of a business. And as such, automating that process is absolutely key, and making it as manageable as possible and as automatic as possible is very powerful, or is essential.
Chris, what do the folks sort of dialed in?
Well,
what did they say?
Yeah, we have 91% no and 8% yes.
Okay, at least that ties in with my experience and our experience.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I mean, maybe this is not the right time for this, but I see a lot of clients. I do a lot of trusted advisory, etc. It's surprising how much folks do not, use automation. I mean, as in clients are not willing to use it, or they think it's too expensive, or they think it's sorry, there's a car behind me. Nothing to do with me. Anyway, in terms of people think it's a maturity issue, it's an icing on the cake. I've said this many times where I do a lot of consultancy and speaking. Automation must not be an icing on the cake. I think automation must be something that anybody should try, rather than wait to be fully mature.
Yeah.
What do you think, Chris? Dom?
I think you're absolutely right. I think most people will look at the what they perceive to be the cheaper option in the beginning, which is to nail it down manually. And then once they have a mature policy or whatever it is that they're trying to move towards an automated process, then they'll implement that. Then they'll put that icing on the cake as you described it. I think what a lot of people don't realize is that the manual method, although you're not buying a solution or you're not spending something to implement, it will end up costing you more, essentially, because you've got a manual process that requires people. There's going to be mistakes made. It's inefficient, ineffective, and quite often it's inconsistent as well.
I think inconsistency is the key thing, and compliance has to be consistent across the board. Yep.
Excellent. What's the next poll question, Chris?
Yeah, so our final poll question today is, as a risk and or compliance manager, can you easily identify non-compliance? So I've just enabled that now for our audience.
Yeah, I think we're here it's important to say we're looking at not necessarily the act of being compliant, but the compliance element from a sort of preemptive point of view, from a proactive being compliant in terms of making sure your users are educated, they know how you should be responsibly acting in order to be compliant. Obviously, the actual fact of can you measure compliance or can you prove that you're compliant is a sort of another step further, where there's some great technologies out there that help us to measure that and to try and trap the non-compliant elements.
Yeah, always an interesting one, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I think this answer ties into the earlier automation question, is to be able to demonstrate anything. If it's manual, and there's always going to be errors, there are always going to be inconsistencies. Yep. Even in answering this question, I think automation must underpin the answer. So hopefully we see a similar, answer to the poll. I'll be surprised if it's anything else. Chris, are we seeing any numbers coming in?
Yeah, so that poll has just ended, and we've actually had a much more balanced answer in this poll question than we have in the previous. So we had 58% said no, and 41% said yes.
Oh, wow.
It's a much more balanced answer.
Wow. Oh, well. Any other questions from the audience? I think there were several questions coming in, but we held off.
The questions are about ISACA points as well.
Some points on ISACA. So basically, if you watch this webinar for 45 minutes, that's another minute more. Please don't disconnect yet. You can claim points from ISACA and ISC squared. Yes, you can. Obviously, you must you must not just log in and log out. You must watch the webinar or stay online for at least 45 minutes. This is as I understand it. I do not know if ISACA and IFC Square stipulate it exactly, but from past experiences, you must be online for a certain amount of time. Okay. Any other questions, Chris? I know there were several others coming in from other methods, email and whatnot.
I've got a question here from an audience member, and I'll sort of almost translate it into a more easier question to ask. But in terms of working with third parties and using that portal that you showed, Dom, to show some sort of a policy or a video to a third party, is there any mechanism in the background whereby once they've completed that action, that you can maybe fire off an API or a script so that you can unlock an account for usage or send an email with some credentials in? Any kind of, again, goes back to the automation question.
Yeah, so Netconsent has built into open APIs that can be queried by any system. So basically when somebody tries to log into a particular system, that system can be programmed to request from Netconsent, is this user allowed to go through this policy enforcement point, i.e., have they got anything that is enforced at that policy enforcement point? Now, the key thing with policy enforcement points is what we're trying to do is present people with content at the point at which they are at the highest risk, i.e., there's no point in presenting somebody, for example, with your remote working policy when you're on your first day at the office, if you're going to be office-based and you're not going to work from home for another 6 or 9 months until the snow comes down and you can't get into the office. So what we do there is we set up a policy enforcement point on the VPN access, and we present people with their policy, their remote working policy, at the point of when they log on to the VPN. And so we have these open APIs that people can query that will basically give a response back saying, no, there's nothing outstanding, or yes, there is something outstanding.
Okay. Chris, was there an AD question? Was there? I thought there was.
Yeah, there is. I was just about to ask it. So we've got a question here. Does Netconsent integrate with directories like Active Directory? And if so, how easy is it to do so?
It's extremely easy to connect to an Active Directory. We had a customer recently that's been a customer for a long time with 5,000 users. They connected into another 2 Active Directories to add on from 5,000 users to 15,000 users, and the whole process onto a single server to extend from 5,000 users to another 2 ADs with another 10,000 users in took all of about 10 minutes to do. That initial synchronization we then left running for about an hour whilst it pulled all the information in and worked out who needed what, but it's extremely easy to connect into Active Directory. We can deploy an organization of 20 users or 20,000 users in under 2 hours.
Wow. I think that's the key, isn't it? If there's no AD integration, then something like this would not be effective. But 20,000 users in 2 hours. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. That's pretty impressive. Okay. Any other questions, folks?
No, we are out of questions.
Which is good. I mean, everyone basically loved what they saw, hopefully. I think if we, obviously, as always, do leave us feedback. We appreciate all the feedback that comes in, and we try to make these webinars as engaging and informative and educational as possible. So, Chris, you want to kind of close this, and we take it from there.
Yeah, excellent. So I guess we should say thank you to Amar for facilitating, and thank you very much, Dom, for the demonstration that you took us through. And of course, thank you to our audience for joining us today. We always appreciate when people join our webinars. As Amar said, please leave some feedback, and of course, look out in the future for other Cyber Management Alliance webinars.
Thank you, everybody.
Chris, Amar, thank you very much for your time, and
Thanks,
thank you, everybody, for an enjoyable webinar.
Thank you.